Hello, learners. Welcome to our lesson in business studies. This is Mr. Erastus Juma, and we are continuing with our topic, international trade. In our previous lesson, we did introduce trade restrictions, and we said that trade restrictions refer to the deliberate measures, very deliberate measures by the government to limit the imports and exports of a country. And we said that trade restrictions are also referred to as the protectionism. And we now want to look at the different forms in which the trade restrictions can take place. And later on, we'll look at some of the reasons why certain economies can decide to restrict trade between them and other countries. Now, one way in which a trade restriction can be done is known as the tariffs, imposition of the tariffs. And when we talk of the tariffs, we refer to the taxes which are levied on both the import and the export. A common term for the taxes that is posed or that is levied on both the import and export is known as the tariffs. Now, it can be used to increase or decrease the level of both import and export, depending on the prevailing situation of a country. Maybe a country wants to correct a BOP which is unfavorable, then they can decide either to levy taxes either on imports so that their exports increase. Another way in which trade restriction can be done is the imposition of quotas. Now, what do we mean by quotas? Quotas refer to the restriction on the quantity of goods to be either imported or exported. And mostly it is tax that is levied on the commodities of goods that are to be imported. Now, it can be increased or decreased to increase the level of import or the level of export, depending on what a country wants to achieve. Another way in which this can be done is known as the total ban or the zero quota. Now, this is where the government bans completely the amount of a commodity to be imported. Then we also have what is known as the complicated import procedure, also known as the administrative bottlenecks. Now, when we talk of the administrative bottlenecks, this is whereby a government puts a very cumbersome procedures, especially in the process of importing a commodity, to discourage some importers from importing. The government just comes up with very bureaucratic and very lengthy processes of maybe acquiring the legalities in importing a commodity. Now, these will discourage most of the traders, and therefore they will decide to give up in importing, therefore enabling the government to achieve what they really wanted to achieve. We also have what is known as the subsidies on locally produced goods to discourage the imports. The government can decide to subsidize the production of local produce. And when the government subsidizes the local produce, the importation of goods that are produced in other countries will be discouraged. Then we have the legislation against importation of certain goods. The government can put up certain laws that discourage the importation of certain goods. Why will this be done? Maybe to promote the local production, to ensure that a country does not import everything, even those that they can easily produce. Then we have setting the standards of the products to be imported. And maybe these standards can be set so high that other countries may not meet. And when standards are set so high, just like when you want to join certain schools and maybe the administration of that school do not want you to join, then they set for you very high standards such that you don't meet them. They even tell you for you to be admitted in a certain class or a certain form, you have to score maybe 85% in mathematics, yet the best that you can get is maybe 54. Now that will discourage you from getting admission in that school. And that is what the government also does, sets standards so high for the goods to be imported. Now, what are some of the reasons for trade restrictions? Number one, the government can come up with protectionism measures to prevent the inflow of harmful goods into the country. The inflow of harmful goods into the country. That may be harmful to the lives of the citizens. There are certain goods which are so harmful that if the borders of a country were just opened for trade to take place, these commodities will find their way into the country. Some of them are like hard drugs, like the heroin, the nicotine. Now the government can decide to restrict trade to ensure that these harmful commodities do not find their way into the country. Another reason for trade restrictions is to protect the local infant industries that may not be able to compete favorably with well-established industry. Remember, in most of the developing economies, the industries are so infant, they are so juvenile, and therefore they need to be protected from competition by the already established industries from other economies. Another reason for trade restrictions is to give a country a chance to exploit its natural resources in producing their goods. In most of the developing countries, there are a lot of natural resources that lie unexploited. Why? Because they prefer either importing goods from other countries, therefore not seeing the available resources that need exploitation. So the government can decide to restrict trade so that the government can exploit their own resources. Another one is to protect strategic industry. Since their collapse may make the country to suffer, there are certain strategic industries in a country. For example, the security. These are very strategic, very key. The government needs to protect these kind of industries or industries that produce basic commodities. A country cannot rely on other countries for basic commodities. If that happens, then strategic industries in the country may suffer. And if they suffer, if those countries withdraw their support, then the country will end up suffering. We also have to minimize dependency of the country on other countries for their stability. There is need for independence. A country should not keep on depending on others. Another reason is to create employment opportunity to its people by establishing the industries to produce the goods and services. Members of a country need to be employed. And this can only happen if a country establishes industries within her own borders. Another one is to prevent dumping of goods in the country. Dumping simply means selling of third-hand commodities, very cheap commodities in a country. Now a country needs to prevent dumping, like we've heard of the third mobile phones getting their way into our country. These needs to be protected, which may create unfair competition. We have to correct the balance of payment deficit by limiting import. We also have to protect good cultural and social values, which may be influenced by unaccepted values they are likely to acquire from other countries through interaction. Remember, cultures like the gayism, the homosexuality, the sale of pornographic materials. A country must protect her social values. There are things that a country believes in, that when you open your borders for trade with these other countries, you may end up compromising your culture, and therefore these must be protected. Another one is to expand the market for locally produced goods by restricting the number of foreign goods in the market. And finally, we have to enable the country to earn foreign exchange through imposing taxes and other tariffs. Dear learners, in our next lesson, we will now look at some of the advantages of trade restrictions and even the disadvantages of trade restrictions. Thank you for your time. Until next time, goodbye.